My goodness, we're really hooked up here. So let me see if I could just get unwound a little bit here. This wire, um, this wire, Conrad, uh, that's better. Okay, and then maybe we could.
Bring it back behind.
Oh, okay,
Be very careful when you get up. Okay. Oh, you're going to bring it behind her. Okay.
yeah, and then maybe these chairs here could be put in the front because. Okay, my goodness. The technology is very, very complex. And maybe this chair could be back there so that people coming in will have a spot. Welcome, welcome, everybody. It's very exciting to have this workshop with our own Gendlin. And this workshop is sponsored by the FORP alias RFOP group. Now, I bet you all know what that is. To give you a little history, Jean and I have been in dialogue for about 30 years about focusing and relationality. At times we're right in sync, and other times we're at each other's throats.
And both will happen today.
I made him promise, and he said he would be very positive.
I will be very positive.
We'll see. But for the sake of showing the in-syncness, Jean had left me a message saying, the problem that I have is that it sounds like you're saying that relationality and focusing are two different things with your RFOP. R and F aren't two different things. And so I was all prepared, and I said, I totally agree with you. That is absolutely true. And I had written this article called Two Interwoven Miracles about focusing and relationality. And I was going to Boston to do a workshop, and I also did a workshop for the Metro focusing people. How many Metro people do we have here tonight? Raise your hands. It's a wonderful, wonderful new group. And everybody else should go to Metro Focusing who hasn't been there. So I was doing a presentation for Metro Focusing about RFOP, and I went to that meeting and I said, as you can attest, in case Jean doesn't believe me, you can verify this. I said, it's not two miracles, there's only one. Relationality and focusing are one process. It's one interactional process. And as a result, we've changed our name. Instead of to RFOP, we've changed our name to FORP, Focusing Oriented Relational Therapy. So we have, and what we mean by that is that focusing is an orientation. Not only as a therapist am I oriented by my own focusing, my own in-touchness with the emergence, but also I'm oriented as a therapist by everything I learn about change and emergence from the focusing process. And so that orientation helps me to situate myself in time and space in the therapeutic session and in the therapeutic relationship. So I'm oriented by focusing, and I'm also a relational therapist, meaning that I emphasize the importance and the value of relationality in many, many ways. And we'll talk about some of that tonight. So FORP is sort of relational in two ways. It's relational and focusing on one thing, and then also there is an orientation toward all the ways that we work with the relationship in a relational therapy. So How many of you are here from our FORP program? Let's have you stand up. All the FORP people. Jenny? Killiope? Oh, stand up. Come on. Let's stand up. Many of you have really helped to make this event, and we are all sponsoring the event. And it's so nice to have Jean here with us for our program. So without any further, I think I'll tell you also that our schedule is a little different than what it says on the flyer. Jean is going to talk for about a half hour, and then he and I are going to dialogue for about 20 minutes, and then you all will come into it, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll talk about the quotes from Jean. How many of you have those quotes in your hands? Pick out the ones you want him to talk about, and we may do something experiential also. So I present you Jean Gendlin.
Hello, hello. Well, I want to say first that Lynn and I have been talking for a long time and arguing for a long time. So anything you have to say or ask about or comment on will be very welcome. It will help both of us clarify where this thing is at for us. So don't lose track of it. Don't, you know, especially now if I'm going to say anything either disturbing or unclear or whatnot, I'd love to hear some confused statement from you. What in the world can you mean by this, or something like that?
Yes, jump right in. Don't be shy.
That's right. Don't
This
wait
is very
until
informal.
Right. Don't wait till you have it all clear, because then you won't say anything, and we'll go home in the same shape we come, and we don't want to do that. Okay. Then I want to say, when Lynn and I are talking about clinical practice or therapy or examples, we never disagree. There is nothing we disagree about. Then as soon as she states her point of view in abstract terms, then I get all upset. So first I have to explain that. Okay. Back in 1954, I think it was. No, 52. So that's what? That's more than half a century ago. I joined a group of therapists. I was a philosophy student, but they said, yeah, that's interesting to have a philosopher. So I joined them, and I was in the practicum, and it was just a time when research findings were coming in. Research findings from a 3-year project, big thing. And Carl Rogers had predicted that the relationship would make a difference. The relationship would affect the outcome. We had a whole bunch of I just joined then. I was a green student. Bunch of outcome measures, all different kinds. And the research showed definitively that the relationship made no difference. So that was a great disappointment. But I do want to say, in my experience, somebody way back then tried to say that the relating is basic to what's going on in therapy. And I thought that too, but the research said no. So I went looking to see how had they measured this relational thing. Well, they measured it by classifying all the statements. And so there were statements talking about us or the therapist, and they were classified relationship. And then there were statements about oneself and one's inner experience and all that, and they were classified not relationship. And how much relating there was going on made absolutely no difference. Well, I was in therapy at the time, and for me, that made perfect sense. I never talked about my therapist. I was much too shy to ever do that. Everybody called him by his first name, but I didn't. And I didn't call him anything else either. I just didn't. So I knew that when I walked in the door, before I walked across the room and sat down there, when I walked in the door, I was different. And that happened completely regularly. And so I thought, well, what I really want is I want to be like that when I'm not here, you know. So I said to myself, that's the relationship. And the statements aren't going to tell you anything about it. So from then on, for the next 20 years or so, I fought this battle in favor of relationships. Because at the time, and not many of you are old enough to remember that time, it was a time when psychology consisted entirely of individual differences. That's all they were interested in. Everything was individual. Everything was individual differences. Everything came out of the individual. If you had any relational stuff, it was projection. It was transference. And your doctor, you know, if you said to your analyst, Dr. Morrison, I love you, or Dr. Morrison, I'm mad at you, or anything like that, Dr. Morrison would say, that can't be. You don't really feel about me. It has to be your father or somebody else in your past. That was all that was permitted. And I had one client I had being a trainee who absolutely was driven crazy by that because she loved Dr. Morrison, and she knew that she loved Dr. Morrison. She had never met anybody like that before, and Dr. Morrison could not stand it. So, again, in my own experience as a client, I knew that it's always both. It's always what's going on now, and the past is in there. If the past hadn't been the way it was, this wouldn't be going on this way now. The past is always there, and the present is always there too. But that's not how people understood it. And even when I went to make focusing instructions, which was revolutionary, and part of the courage it took to do that was a group of students that I worked with. When that research came out and it showed, first there was research to show that it doesn't change over therapy. Then we were very disappointed because we thought that over the course of therapy, people would do more and more inner touch making. At the time, we called it PFC, PCF, preconceptual feelings. We thought were very important. Well, that didn't increase over therapy. Instead, you could predict from the first 2 interviews whether it was going to succeed or fail. Well, that was horrible because that means people get together for 2 years and all this loving and care and effort and money and everything else, and you could predict from the beginning that it wouldn't do any good. So I went and did focusing instructions to get people to have preconceptual feelings. And then when that result came out, then people said, oh, this is for those people for whom it's indicated. The people who are already going to be successful with that kind of thing, those are the ones who should have this kind of therapy, and other people shouldn't. Because everything was individual differences. There were only individuals. There were no relationships. And then one day, and I don't know that I marked the day exactly, it all flipped over, and the pendulum went to the other side, and now we have only relationships. Now everybody's talking about dialogue and interaction, and there aren't any more individuals, there are only relationships. So you think I'm happy? I'm just as unhappy as I was before. And meanwhile, being a philosopher, I know where that comes from. That doesn't come from psychology or psychotherapy. It comes from postmodernism. They eliminated the subject, the human individual. And that was a good revolution to have if you accept that revolutions are like that. They turn everything upside down, and so nothing really changes. It's just upside down. So they were still thinking about everything the same way, but now they were rejecting the individual And so in the postmodern philosophy for the last 25, 30 years, there aren't supposed to be any individuals. That gets rid of a lot of junk about how the individual is the source of everything and there aren't any relationships. But it puts in a lot of junk because now there are only relationships, there aren't any individuals. Now if you say somebody, philosophers are very peculiar. This happens in philosophy all the time. Back in 17-something, they got rid of matter. And the famous Samuel Johnson misunderstood this, and he kicked a stone and he said, "There, I disproved the bishop's theory that there is no matter." He didn't understand that the bishop, Berkeley, was changing the concept of matter, not matter. The same thing happens with the unconscious. People who see that the unconscious is a little homunculus, a little person underneath the person who knows everything you don't know, that's a stupid theory. So they say there is no unconscious. Well, that's silly. There is what they're pointing to with the word unconscious. But that concept isn't right. Do you follow me? And that goes on all the time. So now there aren't any individuals, but of course that isn't meant in the simple way that the man who kicked the stone took it. It's not meant to deny that you're sitting here and I'm sitting here. But it is a way of misunderstanding everything just the way it was before, only upside down. So now the individual would be some content that comes out, the source of all the content. Well, it's clear that that's not right. The source of all the content is clearly everything together, the culture and the interaction and the other people and you and everything else. So, yeah, we got rid of some bad stuff, and we also have some more bad stuff. So when Lynn sticks the R into FOT, there are two things that bother me about it. And as long as you know those, I'll be okay. One of them is the implication that, the old implication, that now there's only R. Now you can't have F anymore because there isn't any such thing. There's only relating. The postmodern people have it so that what happens in my therapy with you is a product of the stuff that you say and the stuff that I say. And I deny it. I say, no, I'm not a product. I'm not a product of what you say, and I'm not a product of what I say either, surely. It's a misunderstanding of what a person is to think of a person as content. The same misunderstanding that I was fighting in 1952 or 4, whenever it was. You can't measure the relationship by classifying the sentences, whether they're about the relationship or whether they're about the self. Doesn't tell you anything. Why not? Well, because the living process is not what we say. The living process is not content. The living process isn't even what we do either. The living process is always implicit. And you see where we start to agree, Lynn and I. It's an implicit, living is implicit. And then what you do and say from it, well, that varies. So you think if I get up and walk out now, that's all there is to me is getting up and walking out? You wouldn't think that. Well, neither is what I'm saying all there is to me or all there is to you. So if I talk about the relationship, that's swell. But if I'm too shy to talk about the relationship, there's no relationship. Conversely, okay, so one thing that bothers me is the current cant, the current language bothers me just as much as the old language. We have to be able to think of living as a richer, much more intricate, much more complicated, implicit ongoing from which we speak. So right now I'm filling you up with my words, but surely you're sitting there, you're not just my words, you still know who you are and where you're going and many things that are more important than my words. And so, simply said, one thing that bothers me is the current language. So when Lynn and I talk about therapy, then the current language doesn't bother me. But as soon as she seriously makes statements in the current language, then I say, no, no, wait, that sounds like those people that don't agree with you. You know, those people that think there are no people. Well, Lynn would never think there were no people. But when you say it that way, okay. The second thing that bothers me, perhaps even more, is that for people who don't know focusing-oriented therapy, it sounds like focusing-oriented therapy is intrapsychic, is all about going in. Well, we know that we can't make it on that. One would imagine from this kind of talk, not that any focusing therapist would ever do that, but you can imagine from the kind of talk that focusing-oriented therapy is not relational, which is absurd. Then it would be, what, just two people sitting in silence for an hour or 50 minutes? Or what? It would be a therapist saying, go focus and leave me alone, or something like that. I don't want to be bothered, you do it in there. It's an absurdity to think of focusing-oriented therapy as the opposite of relational therapy. Now, it also makes relational therapy quite empty. I'm not interested in the kind of therapy that, if I took the current people literally, there would be these two half shells that are somehow or other generating some content between them that amounts to two people, something like that. So now I've told you what I'm against, right? Good. Okay. Now, where I want to go from here is to say methods and theories. And that's not the same thing, certainly. Methods tell us what to do as therapists, and theories tell us why it works, or supposedly why it works. Methods and theories, I say, are all helpful, and we should learn from all of them. But they're desperately mistaken if you choose one of them. And currently, that's still the style. We teach all these methods to the students, and then we expect them to go out and shape people's heads in just triangles or trapezoids. They're supposed to choose one method. So I'm saying, no, don't choose one method. Know all the methods. Each method can sensitize you to very important things. If you know the method, don't do it, but you know it. So then, when that kind of thing comes up, you have a repertoire of things to do. So methods are good for repertoires of things to do. And I love every method that I ever learned, and I would like to learn some more of them. And in that spirit, I am learning some things from the relational people, because it gives me more things I can do when I'm stuck, and it also encourages me to do that kind of thing more. And so here's the positive of it. Especially those of us in the focusing-oriented, I forgot to say that focusing-oriented therapy is a clumsy title, isn't it? But I fought for it, because at the time that book came out and we started to have a kind of therapy, the Germans were years ahead of us. They already had focusing therapy everywhere. Focusing therapy was all over. And I couldn't stand focusing therapy. What would it be? So we've battled for a year or so, and we settled finally on focusing-oriented therapy, which may not mean anything to other people, but to me at least, it means that you do anything and everything that was ever helpful for anybody, but you do it in a focusing mode. That means you are in touch with focusing levels in you, and you invite help the client to get in touch with deeper levels of them. Yes? Okay. So my second point is, wants to be, don't, in therapy, as a therapist, don't do a method. If you do a method, my burlesque of this is that you're really saying, I am a Gestalt or whatever therapist. I'm a focusing therapist. I'm a whatever, relational therapist. If you come to me, you're going to do Gestalt, okay? If you don't like it, go to somebody else. That's not an attitude to have towards a human being who is sitting there. So completely the opposite. When I get ready to see somebody and I may be in all kinds of bad mood and upset and troubled and whatever, but in 5 minutes my client will come, I get ready for that. And that means another human being will be sitting there. And then I become the chair, the person in the chair. This is a very big chair, and I'm a very small person. But I know how to be in the chair. So then I take all my own stuff that's been bothering me and I put it here, and I take all the methods that I know and I put them there, and I am armed, right? I know a lot of methods. I know a lot of things I could do, so I won't be stuck, don't worry. But here's my armament, and then I'm open. And then somebody is sitting there. And I'm open. I'm waiting for them. They're somebody. And they live in a world that's skewed to mine. It's different. And so I'm waiting. And what am I doing when I'm waiting? Am I relating or am I focusing? Right? Just like I, as a client, when I walked in the room and I was already different, was I relating or was I focusing? Don't divide that. That doesn't make any sense. So then I am relating directly. Now, my client may or may not be able to relate directly, may or may not be able to look at me even. May be like I was as a client, too shy to do any kind of overt thing. But that doesn't matter. I'm here, and I know there's somebody in there. Now, currently they're trying to tell me there's nobody in there. There's only whatever you're going to do and whatever they're going to do. That's not true. I know there's somebody in there. And I know there's somebody way in there, even if it may take a long time for that person to get in touch with those levels inside. And until they do, we aren't really going to know a whole lot. Would you grant? I mean, this person's going to tell me their world, and that's a lot, and I have to learn it. But in terms of what's really wrong, we're not going to hear from because what's really wrong is always around the corner and then again around the corner and then down a little and then around that corner. And unless you go those steps, you don't really know. Because each person is this unique world that's beyond the common world, which is what I'm saying these days about Barreau, that language makes you think as if the language says what the language wants to say, the common phrases that everybody knows. And you have to use those, you think, and then you just hope that the phrases will accidentally, indirectly sort of say what you want to say. You don't have to do that. You can go past there and go directly to where you're alive and speak from there. But it's some trick to do. And some people will come to therapy and they already know how to do that, but some don't. So I am relating to the person in there from the start. And what do I do? Well, whatever I think is helpful. So routinely, while I don't know anything, I want to respond mostly reflectively so that this person has the experience of being seen. And since nobody does that, if I do it well and if I'm lucky, the person will go home even after the first interview and say, huh, they may not have any words for it, but there will be some kind of implicit effect. And I want that all the time. But then again, I may not only reflect, because only reflect is making a method out of listening. You see, I'm client-centered. You come here, you're going to get back whatever you say. That's all I do. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. No, no, that's not listening. Listening is listening for the person in there. And so when something comes from there that says, I don't know, something that may move me to say something quite unusual or quite listening unreflectively. And then I also know that when I say those things from me, and like I thought yesterday, if I'm going to demonstrate with somebody, you'll see this right away. Because the first thing I do when I demonstrate with somebody in front of a big group is I relate to them in terms of trying to make them comfortable. So I say, well, which maybe I don't get to do if we don't have time, but I say, well, I'm going to ignore them now, and various other things like that. And I say, you don't have to say everything. What comes in you, keep it for yourself and say only the part that you want. And right away you see a person go, easing there when they come all tense to demonstrate with me. So what am I doing there? I'm not reflecting, right? I'm not stating back what they said. I'm saying me and where I am and letting the person get a feel of me and where I am. And then if what I said was wrong, then I find for years now, almost all the years I've practiced, I find that doing something wrong, if you can catch it, if you know it was wrong, it's better than if you hadn't done it, because you go to try to fix it. And first you fix it by understanding it. Oh, I see. To you that meant da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, I didn't know that, but I see now. Oh, yeah. And then I may even fix it further and go further steps with it, so that I am no longer, well, I don't know that I ever was, worried about doing the wrong thing. But I do have a hangover from client-centered therapy of being still relatively shy. Like I'll let a silence go for a long time, but then again I don't, so that's not right either. I don't let a silence go for a long time. I want to be clear in the silence that we are connected. So if we're silent and the person is clearly moving inside, oh, then I'm satisfied. But if the person's looking around for sort of help me, I'm stuck, I'm not going to leave them there, right? Whatever I say, it doesn't go any further, or are you stuck, or was that bad what we did, or something or other. And then whatever I say is bound to be wrong. I'm not interested in saying something right. I'm interested in getting something right from the person. So this is my chief point, really. There is a person there, and if you will listen, you can tell that what comes from the person back at whatever you said is that's them. And what you said was just an invitation to them, or reaching for them, or looking for them, or whatever it is. And anything I ever say is like that. Then when I hear back, oh, well, then I know better, right? Then I've heard from them. So I'm denying that there is no person there, and that what we're doing or being is some kind of co-created product of the two of us. I'm saying, yeah, it takes the two of us. It takes me to say something so that something will come back. But that what comes back lets me know where we are. Now, suppose I say something new that wasn't part of what my client had thought, and I teach all my clients indirectly by, if I say something and then they're sort of saying, well, that isn't quite right, and then again you see why it isn't quite right is because I just wave that away. I say, never mind, don't get stuck with what I said. What should be said? And so after a while, my clients do this too. I start to say something that's not right, and they go. Because they know that I'm not interested in what I'm saying. I'm interested in what is actually there. On the other hand, when I say something surprising and different than they had, but it's right, and my client says, oh, yeah, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? then what I said becomes their own. Then often with relief I will say, oh, well, if it's right, I'll say it again, you know, and I do. Because if it's right, then we want to stay there for a minute, not run onto something else. So my point is that even if I contribute the content, even if I contribute the interpretation, the content, or whatever you want to call it, when it's right, it becomes my client's own. And if it doesn't do that, then it doesn't take. So then it was just an invitation. Then I say, well, what would be right? You know, go see. And then if they can go see, they do that. They go see. And if go see doesn't mean anything to them, well, then we go on some other way. And there the R is very welcome in FOT, because the more things that we can do when somebody is not able to go in like that, the better. Because every time we do something, then we can point to where they were in touch with themselves. So focusing is a broad thing, and instructing people to focus is a very narrow thing. And mostly in therapy, I don't do it. I don't instruct people to focus. I invite them. I say, what comes here when you say that? And that to me is a huge, wonderful thing that works with half the people, and I recommend it highly to you, whatever your orientation is. If you wish your patient would go in and be more in touch, just say, what comes to you here as you say that? And then half the people will go right down, including very upset people and inner city children and all kinds of nonverbal people. They will go right here and be surprised that you care about it, if it's the first time you've said that. But they will go right there, and your whole therapy will deepen immediately. The other half of a typical patient load will say, what? And so you say, never mind, because it doesn't mean anything to them to say what comes to you here, you know. But you can get away with it once. But of course, if you start to push it, don't. That's not therapy. Then you're not responding to this person here.